All right, Daniel, welcome to In God's Gay Image.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you on, actually.
That's sweet.
I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I've been wanting to have someone on our podcast that can talk the language that I grew up in, which
Sure.
is the evangelical language.
Absolutely.
In God's Gay Image is all about queer people, how we express our spirituality. Do we have a spirituality?
Mm-hmm.
Are we allowed to have a spirituality? What does it look like, for many of us, and what we've kind of had to go through to get there?
And finding your frequency with God. I mean, by that I mean, we have different pathways to, the divine or higher power.
Sure.
And I liken it to like a transistor radio. I'm too young to. I mean, I just know of it. Like when you kind of fiddle around with a dial and you find like the clarity, So I like that analogy for sure.
I worry a little that I might be a bit of a letdown as far as where I am currently in my spirituality, because I've come to a place where I have almost none, which is it's a different place to be. So, I mean, I guess we can get there, but I'm just warning you guys ahead of time. My current state of spirituality is fairly limited.
I think that's fair. And I think a lot of people who would be listening to something like this would be able to relate to that.
I think it's a fresh take on it as well. The paradox of like, okay, being engaged with people who question you about spirituality, but you have at this point in your life, maybe you have a different point of view about it. Yeah.
For sure.
So before we went on camera, I told you that living with Steed and interacting not only with him, but I've had the pleasure of spending time with my in-laws, his parents.
Sure.
And they are nothing but love. They're heart-driven, but they're also quite, devout with their faith.
They are diehard.
So there's always this sort of...
evangelicals.
Yeah.
And, a great example is, we've been together for 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've traveled with us. They've done all sorts of stuff with us. They have been, a part of our relationship all the way through. We got our Christmas card this year, and it still says on there that our greatest hope for you is that one day the two of you will find,
Of course.
the salvation through Jesus, with the assumption, of course, that we don't have any salvation.
Right.
That,
of course. Well,
right.
How could you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can absolutely relate if I can riff on that a little bit. I mean, it's...
Go for it.
So, my... a super hyper fast summary for me, I was raised in the church. I'll try to just put out the big bullet points of, I think, what shaped the way I was raised. When I was 6, my mother passed from cancer. And I can't really remember anything prior to that, but I think what happened there is my dad's religion locked in really, really hardcore after that. And he was already highly religious, and that was ratcheted down to the nth degree. I wasn't allowed to watch television in the home. I was specifically forbidden to watch Smurfs because Gargamel is a wizard. G.I. Joe because they have guns. We were allowed to watch some Disney movies, but they had to be screened. Someone at my dad's church probably had to be like, this one's okay. Ironically, Alice in Wonderland is one that I was allowed to watch. And it's that's basically just a story about taking drugs. And just expand.
I can totally relate to that. My grandmother grabbed a copy as a kid of the Hardy Boys novel from me because it was the Hardy Boys and the cult of something. And when she saw that word, she grabbed it and she took it right over and threw it into the fireplace.
Because of the word cult, probably.
She thought,
definitely. That reminds me, I just had a flashback one time. So after my mother passed, several people took care of us while my dad worked, and one was my grandmother. My grandmother, I hate to say this in a public forum, but it's true. She was insane with religion. All she ever said to me was, God loves you, he's watching you. But I remember this one instance. I was tiny. I was a little kid, and I had taken a marker and drawn all over myself. And she was the one that found me like that, and she freaked out and started talking about there's verses in, I think it's the Old Testament, about people that were worshiping Baal and how they had marked their bodies and, in service to the devil or whatever. And she was like scrubbing this off of me, telling me this story about how I was, worshiping Satan or whatever. And it was just like, what? Anyway, I need to get fast forward. So that's sort of where I grew up in. And then it continues to this day. My dad didn't attend my wedding to my husband. He declined to come. And he similarly always asks about Mike. He'll send like a Christmas card. He usually does it. He'll send me a book. So every Easter, every Christmas, probably Valentine's Day, there's like these holidays and birthdays, of course. I'll always get some Christian book, and he'll write a note on the inside of it. And it's like, he's always hoping, the last time that they stayed with us, Mike and I sleep in different rooms because he snores. And I gave my parents my room. And after they left, I started finding like tracts, like stuffed into little places in my room, like Bible tracts. And I was just like, that's it. They're not staying with us anymore. That's dumb. But my dad is one of the most sweet, loving individuals that you would ever meet. But it's so, I've realized now how conditional that is, and how, using love as a tool to manipulate your child. I don't know if he wouldn't recognize that he's doing anything wrong.
That was a question of mine. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. There's nothing malicious on his part.
Right.
But it's so conditional. When I was outed to my dad, he threw me out of the family. I was outed at 18. Anyway, what you were gonna?
Well, it's passing. It's an opinion, actually. What does it mean for you to meet him where he is?
So, I always have. When my mother passed, and when I was very young, I made a pact with myself that I would never cause my father any pain. So. That ended up not like really working out very well, but I've spent my entire life guarding my father internally. And anytime someone would, like when I'd be in therapy or something, and my therapist would say, "Don't you think that your dad doing this was wrong or hurtful or whatever?" And I would be like, "No, like my dad did everything out of love. And if he hurt me, it wasn't on purpose. He did it because he thought he was doing the right thing." And I've been really, really protective of him my whole life. But these past couple of years, I let go of some of that and actually went through a period of deep anger with my father. And everything that's gone on over these past couple of years in my life and where I'm at now, I think has a lot to do with the work that I've done around my relationship with my dad and figuring out how to be mad at him. I remember one time I was sitting in therapy and my therapist was like, "How are you going to get to the other side of this stuff with your dad if you can't be angry with him? Like, you've got to figure out how to get angry." And I just burst into tears. I was just like, I can't. Like, my dad, he's just like this sweet, gentle, loving, he couldn't hurt a fly, but like he fucked me up. To this level that is just like it just rules my life sometimes, And anyway, so I kind of figured out how to get angry with my dad. I remember one time I got off the phone with him, and so swearing's okay on this podcast, right?
Yeah, sure, yes.
All right. Anyway, because I know I already did, but anyway,
spiritual people don't.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah,
you're like, God,
you're going to hell,
edit
bitch.
a lot of this out. But all these jump cuts, like
exactly.
But, oh God, where was I going with that?
You got off the phone with your dad.
Oh yeah, thank you. And I went in and like laid with my husband, and I was like, my fucking dad is such a fucking idiot. And like I was just like going in on my dad, and my husband was like, whoa, like be careful, this doesn't eat you up. And I told him, I was like, no, I need to talk about my dad this way. I've never talked about my dad this way ever, and it feels really good. Like it feels good. To be calling my dad an idiot, because he is an idiot. Like he's a sweet man, he's a loving man, and he's really stupid.
Right.
But in a innocent way. I mean, like, he thinks he's doing the right thing.
Right.
He just.
I think that what I found, and you can tell me if this resonates, but for me, I found that what happens with evangelical kids is that, or I guess I should speak only for myself, but I never grew up with a sense of being able to make my own decisions and trusting in my own intuition and doing what I felt was right. The message that I always heard was that you are born a sinner.
Right.
You have no redeeming qualities except through the blood of Jesus. And the only way to know that is through this one book, the Bible, or by these other Christian people who are supposedly in some sort of place of authority to tell you how to interpret it. So the idea was that as soon as you feel like something is the right way to go, or as soon as you feel like you're doing the right thing, then you're in dangerous territory because that's immediately off the track. And so growing up, I just had there was no way of figuring out who I was. And, the thing about the evangelical culture, they have all the exits blocked, right? I mean, whenever you try to get off that ramp, they've got some explanation for why this is all leading to absolute destruction. And so it just keeps you so confined, or at least it kept me so confined that I didn't know how to express myself. And I totally understand what you're talking about protecting the parents in the sense that, I've spent so much of my adult life trying to prove to my family that that I'm okay.
Right. That you're not going to be gnashing your teeth, rending your clothing for all eternity in a lake of fucking fire. It's so funny. My dad recently has been on this weird kick, and I don't know if it's because he's getting older or whatever, but I was with my dad and my sister in Phoenix at my sister's house, and my dad was like, I need to talk with you guys about something, and so we're just like, okay, what's this? So he sat us down and he's just like, I just want you to know that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life for all eternity, because when you were a child, you gave your life to Jesus, and I saw in your eyes that you meant it, and I was like, I was sitting there just biting my tongue. I didn't say anything. I made it through that conversation without blasting him. But when we were done and my sister and I got together, I was like, of fucking course I said the magical phrase to get out of burning in a lake of fire for all eternity. Like, who would tell that to a child? That's the kind of stuff that gets me upset right now. Not upset, I just can't believe it. Who would say that to a child, that like, you're so bad, you're so awful, that if you were the only person on the planet, if you were the only person that ever existed, God would still have had to send his son to die by being nailed to a cross because you're so bad, just as you are, and it's like, it's just hard to reconcile that someone would do that to a child. I know that they mean well, and that's what makes it so difficult to be angry, because it's like, he thinks he's saving me from that very same fate.
That's right. He's
He's terrified.
That's right. From their perspective, I said this on our last episode, it's the most loving thing that they can do, because in their mind, we're the most important people to them, and they are convinced that they will never see us and we will suffer immeasurably. It causes so much pain, not only to us, but I believe to them as well.
Absolutely.
My parents have lived through so much pain. They're such loving people. I think I asked them one time that, as I looked, they've always talked about, their relationship with Jesus. Their relationship with Jesus is the most important thing. But for a long period of time, I was like, your relationship to Jesus seems to be making you miserable. I don't see where the joy.
Like, you're riddled with fear. Like, you're riddled with it. My parents, and look, like, there's nothing wrong with this, but like, they live in a gated community. They interact with the world in an extremely limited way, which, to be fair, I do too. But it's like their whole life, my dad is always putting gold aside, and he's stockpiling guns. And when Y2K happened, he stockpiled water because the world was going to be battling for water. And it's like, he's the most fearful person that I've ever met. It's sort of like, if you've got this loving presence in your life who has told you, once he's in your life, you're set forever, for all eternity. You're set. What's the fear about? Like, why are you the most fearful person that I know? You know, and I don't know. You know, other than it's just instilled. You know?
So this episode is, to me, you know, it's cinematic because we started out with you saying what eventually happened to you, to you, and what you're currently feeling about your spiritual life or lack thereof. But and I also have to make the observation that it's, to me, hearing two men, with a similar spiritual heritage, it's unfortunate because your parents have had to do a double duty of being God's messenger, and all the the doctrines and the roadblocks and the and God's rules and all that, and then being a parent as well. Mm-hmm. But as you were growing up and maybe left the grips of your parents, or you lost your mother when you were 6, your father, did you ever have any serenity, a connection with a higher power?
It's a really good question. I would say that before puberty hit, I was really hooked into God, Okay. But I was this kid, with no experience. But I loved it. I loved the church as a kid. I was highly involved in my Baptist church. I volunteered. I went to, what was it? It's like church twice on Sundays. I would do Monday night visitation. I think it was Wednesday night youth group, maybe. Mm-hmm. There was probably something on Friday night that was youth group oriented too, whatever. I was there constantly. I loved the church, and it was a source of a ton of happiness for me, But then basically, as soon as I started to figure out that I was queer, it very quickly fell apart. And, I spent a couple of years praying. I on my own went to one of those River of Life ministries. I just put myself there in the hopes that this would fix me. But I only went to one meeting because it was the horniest group of people sweating and holding onto the arm of their chair, trying to not guy each other, in this room or whatever. It just was something that you guys just reminded me of for some reason. You get these weird flashes of memory. Yeah. And it's just something that someone says, but it's I remember distinctly the first sexual experience I had with a boy. We were both, 7, 8, whatever. And I remember I fooled around with this kid at his house, and I went home, and the guilt and the shame just descended on me. And so I went and told my dad what had happened. And my dad was okay, you have to be punished. The Lord requires that you be punished. So you're going to be spanked, and so my dad took me aside, spanked me, and then hugged me and told me, I'm sorry, but I have to do this. You have to know, that the wages of sin, this isn't death, but that there are consequences when you sin. And God, whenever I've told that story to therapists, their eyes just light up. They're like, "Ooh, I'm gonna have this client for a long time." Wow. They're like, "Wow, so your dad spanked you, but he said that something in the sky told him that he had to do it or whatever."
Right.
It really, I'm sure, did a number on me. It made me terrified of God, of course. And and the other thing too about my mother passing when I was 6. First of all, my dad and his 2 brothers ran a funeral home, and so death was the family business, which I think maybe just, who knows what that did to my little brain. But then when my mother passed, on the one hand, it was weird, it was just going with my dad to his work again, except that my mother was in the coffin, because I hung out with, I'd go with him to the mortuary or whatever. But also the way it was handled was my dad just said God has taken your mother. We don't get to ask him why. She's in heaven, and she is sitting next to Jesus, and they're always watching you. Your mother and Jesus are always watching. So it made, masturbation just absolute hell. I mean, right. I couldn't masturbate without the shame and guilt just crashing in. Of course, after I'd have an orgasm or whatever, it would just be it would just be terrible. And my dad, it was just kind of like, onward, Christian soldiers. This is what, our lot in life, know, and of course, as you know, there's this weird thing in Christianity where they tell you, like, yes, you have free will, but also, like, every day of your life was already planned by Jesus before you were a twinkle in your mother's eye or whatever. So it's like, well, which is it? Like was this all planned out? So I don't get a choice, but yet you're saying I have free will? So why did God choose me for this storyline? Because this one kind of sucks. It's really fucking me up.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't have chosen to be gay because it went against everything you taught me, and it screwed up my entire foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my first experiences with a boy. It was a neighbor of mine. And coming home after these very innocent.
Right.
I mean,
sure.
Obviously, I guess in my head, they weren't terribly innocent, but I mean, really, physically, they were really innocent.
Sure.
But coming back home, and the first thing I went and washed my hands repeatedly and prayed for forgiveness and prayed for forgiveness and prayed for forgiveness. It was anguish. It was anguish.
Most definitely. Oh God, those years were awful. And that was my high school years. So it's like, I hated high school. I don't have any good memories of high school. And people are like, you go to your I would never go to a high school reunion. My life was awful. So I went to a Christian school from 5th grade to 10th grade. And my freshman year at this Christian school, I was elected high school chaplain. So they had elections for the student body at the end of the year. So my summer I think it was between my freshman and my sophomore year, I had been elected. I was going to be chaplain. And then I figured out my sexuality stuff. That summer, it was like everything just went to pieces, everything, and the church offered no help. I mean, it's like I went to my youth minister, and he was just like, well, you just have to mean it. If you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain.
Right.
So I was like, well, but like, I mean this. Like, I really want this. And it's like, well, I guess, no one ever said on some level you don't mean it. They just basically said you just have to mean it. And if you mean it, God will intercede. That
was my first break, actually, with sort of my belief system cracked when my family found out. I was outed by a classmate of mine. And they sent me first. The first thing they're going to do is send me to the pastor. And as I told him that I was gay, I saw the look in his face and the absolute uncertainty of what could be done. You know what I mean? He had no idea, and I could sense it. I could sense it. There was nothing that he could tell me except exactly what you're saying, just these canned sort of ideas and phrases that I don't know that he fully believed underneath it, right? I mean,
probably not.
It's like you're doomed, right? And I saw it, and I just at that point I didn't know where to take it.
So these were your high school years. So walk us forward through your life, and was there ever a time that you finally harnessed your power and made this decision to question and maybe even let go of your relationship with God?
It's interesting. I think that's what's happening now for me. I think so I was outed, I got thrown out, but I was just starting college, so it was like, I was sort of ready to be out anyway. There was an element that, and so then I just made a disaster of my life and just got into drugs and just sort of became a big mess for 10 years. And definitely threw the baby out with the bathwater. Then I was just like, well, then I'm not thinking about this ever again. And I'm going to stay high 24/7 to never, ever think about this. Then I got sober and got into the program. And I spent, these last 19 and a half years, I would say, really struggling with this concept of God, and to the point where I've gotten to a place where I've realized I didn't believe it this whole time, but I've really been trying to make it work. And I've been, praying in the mornings and, doing things sort of along this, almost the same lines as the Christianity that I was raised with.
Wow.
In a way.
Okay.
And, and it just hasn't, it's never felt like I was doing anything, but I've always just thought, I'm sober and I've stayed sober. So if it's not broken, I don't want to try to fix it. So even if I don't really feel like I'm connecting on any level, I'm going to do this because I want to stay sober. And but the past couple of years, like I was saying, I've gotten to this place. I've done a lot of work around what we're talking about in here today, and made some realizations, I think, and have gotten to a place where what's interesting is, this might sound silly, and I don't know if this is how I actually feel or if I'm just trying to make it sound sexy, but it's like, so I got to this place where I realized that I didn't believe in anything, that I think I'm an atheist.
Okay.
Not even agnostic anymore. Like I've gotten to this weird.
Okay.
I'm probably somewhere in between those two, but so I realized about sobriety. And again, this is my personal thing.
Sure.
I would never indict anyone else's experience, but I realized, like, wait a minute, like I didn't get struck sober by God, and that's something I had struggled with for all the years I was in the program. It's like, well, why did I get struck sober by God, and like that person is struggling, or that person didn't and died, or like, what did I do that magically, it's sort of that old thinking of like, I'm a hand-picked white Protestant male from America, which means I'm blessed and I'm going to spend eternity in heaven. Thank God I wasn't born on some island somewhere where they don't get to hear the story of Jesus.
Right.
And so one of the interesting, I guess, practical side effects of what I'm going through right now has been, all my life, when shit has ever hit the fan around anything, my first reaction has been like, pray. And it's like, put it out in the universe and ask for help. And because of whatever I'm going through right now, where I'm at, lately, when I have that instinct, when something's going wrong in my life and I'm stressed, my first thought is like, I need to pray. And then it's like, wait a minute, I don't believe in that anymore. So like, I have to handle this on my own. If this is a consequence of a choice that I made, it's on me. I don't get to blame something out there that magically put me into this situation or is going to magically help me out of it. Like, it lies on me, and the people in my life that I turn to for help. But I know I'm not really answering the question you asked, other than to say it's sort of where I'm at right now, and is breaking free of this stuff that I've held on to for 50 years.
But it has vestiges of in your life now, because you say when you find yourself in distress or in dire situations, there is this sort of almost like Pavlovian reaction to maybe
like a whisper for how you're raised, how we're raised.
Totally.
To
fall back
to ask for aid or for some sort of something to happen. How do you reconcile that?
I don't know. I haven't yet, other than to say, so I've kind of, I believe that those things, the guilt and the shame for me, the reaching out to something, to a sky daddy or whatever, people will sort of joke, but it's like, those things were instilled at me at such an early age that I believe that my thoughts start from there. That's where my thoughts grow from. So my thoughts, the seed of my thoughts is this place of shame and self-loathing, of not being able to take care of myself, of being, absolutely powerless and needing God to intercede in like almost literally everything in my life. And so that's all I can figure is that the way that my brain formulates thoughts, it starts there. And so changing that has been a really, really long, arduous process that sometimes is a bit much and I step back from because it's just too much emotionally. I've had these periods, again, I keep mentioning these past couple of years because they've been big years for me around this kind of stuff. But it's like, I'll just have these moments where I just sort of, I'm overwhelmed with emotion, and I've never really been like that until recently. And I think some of it is just, it's a sadness. It's an anger, but I don't want to be angry.
So you're giving me clues. I have to say. So I can tell you, as I did before, we went on camera, that I come from a Catholic background, and much could be said, and Catholicism could be maligned in a bunch of pageantry and rituals and all these gilded kind of environment that the church has created, but my upbringing was in another country, so that the spiritual seed was planted in the Philippines, and for some reason it's I don't have the cliched Catholic guilt or the feeling of being cast away from Eden. In fact, my world till now is a kind world. It's full of grace and beauty. I want to ask you, like, in the best way that you can, what does the world feel like to you with everything that you've experienced, veiled in this sort of religious tradition?
God, what a great question. So I'll do like a compare and contrast sort of thing, which is my life before puberty, my life before all of this sort of belief system started to sort of crumble.
Yeah, it's a belief.
I loved life, I loved people. I was just like, believe it or not, like I loved people as a kid. I was involved in everything. I was in youth group. I loved being around people. And then, being rejected by the church, being rejected by my family, being rejected by my childhood friends who were also in the church. I mean, some of them actually like wrote me letters and were like,
wow,
we are cutting you out of our life because, you have chosen to live in sin or whatever. Versus now, I think that I've become very cynical, and it's a massive defense mechanism for me. When we briefly talked a little bit before the podcast about, there were people that I know, and there are people that I know, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, because I from what I remember, you were impressionable with this stuff as well. You believed it like the way I did.
Yes.
And I've met people, who grew up in it. My husband is one. My husband grew up in the Evangelical church.
Oh, really? Okay.
But he didn't take this stuff on.
Yeah.
He didn't
They
take
didn't
this
believe
stuff
it.
on.
Yeah.
And he, there was something in his brain that I wish that I had. I think it's like a common sense thing. Like, I think at a certain point he heard stuff and was like, how can this be true? This doesn't make any sense. And he, at an early age, started detaching, but that wasn't my experience. And so when everything fell apart and when I was sort of, rejected by the groups that were the most important groups in my life, it really, really fucked me up for a good long time. And so I think I live in a world where I distance myself from people generally. I don't. I'm an introvert, and I think maybe I just live in fear of.
Okay.
I'm so susceptible to other people's opinions, still very much so, and that just took a real toll on me as a child because I don't really have a brain that can formulate my own opinions very well. I need help with that.
Wow.
And they were all supplied to me as a child. I don't know if I'm answering your question. But it's a stark difference.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you in the sense. So I had to, in order to start to heal wherever I came from and try to figure it out, I have not been able to throw out that spiritual practice or a spiritual seeking. So a belief system for me has been really important. So I had to come out of the church altogether. I left Christianity altogether whenever I started studying Vedic faith and found a philosophy, in sort of the Hindu tradition or that Eastern tradition. I found this philosophy that worked for me and seemed to make sense. I felt that it was coherent, and which was important to me because I felt like so much stuff in this Christian faith wasn't it just didn't stand up to scrutiny,
Sure,
right? And so
very
that's
much
why
so.
the great, everyone would say that you can't question, as soon as you
Right.
question, right? Because it didn't make sense when you did. It
Absolutely.
it didn't. But so I had to move myself out and plot myself into that and then explore. And I found that has been an interesting journey too, because when I came over into that faith and started studying it, I attached myself to particular deities, right? Because once again, I wanted to sort of overlay this Christian experience, right, where I was still like wanting to worship a deity,
Sure.
right? And then of course there are these different sects and different modes in that faith that talk a lot about non-duality and the oneness of you and God as the same thing, basically. So all that to say, I needed to replace with something. So with this place that you're coming to, where you talk about being atheist or rejecting all of it completely, do you find it's difficult to find a sense of comfort? Is there a fear associated with that? In a sense, I remember a lot of fear when I came out of the Christian faith. I had so much fear around even just exploring, other faith options, and so it took a long time to start to see truth in it, where I could say, okay, I'm okay leaving this behind because I see truth over here that's making sense for me. Because at first I thought this is all blasphemy.
It's interesting, and I really enjoy also like you and I came from very similar backgrounds, and it's sort of cool to see. It's just interesting to see how people may diverge in the way that they process through that kind of stuff. Because one thing I've always known about you is that you've been curious about other stuff. I mean, like you've even become like a satanic tarot card reader. I'm kidding, I'm teasing, but it's like as a child, it was like tarot was like. That's Satan. Like that's
Right.
how you let demons in.
Right.
Like Dungeons and Dragons, forget it. What's been kind of interesting about this recent change for me is there's been this massive sense of relief. Massive. I think what happened for me is I never got beyond, and I still don't know if I ever will, the sort of fear and terror that was sort of put onto me as a child about God and religion and things like that. So, the first time I threw it all out, the baby out with the bathwater, like I said, I just didn't think about it at all. Then I got sober and have sort of been around it for a while, but I've never, I don't know what it is that I haven't explored other stuff other than maybe just being fearful that it would all hold the same sort of judgment, and so I haven't looked into any of it.
Because I presume, I suspect that the sense of relief was letting go of something, but it could easily kind of attach itself to another, sense of reality where you become enslaved, just as enslaved as you were before. You know what I mean?
Just to a different dogma.
To a different dogma, right?
Right.
I wanted to ask you about this is when we talk about purpose in life, I'm consumed with purpose. Like what is the purpose? Because I seemingly have been blessed by so many things, and I could want for very little. So I say, well, okay, I'm in a place of seeming comfort across the board. So what is what's my life purpose? And even when I assess my value system, my core values, some of it comes from my upbringing and my spiritual faith. So when you talk about core values and purpose, where what's, I always call this lover's rock. It's this rock that you swim to for safety. Like what do you anchor yourself?
I have none, man. It's weird. I mean, like, I don't feel anchored. So I feel very grateful to the sense of, how could I say this? Morality seems like the wrong word, but, I was imbued with, a system of interacting with other human beings as a child. And, because my family was, kind and loving and courteous and respectful. Like, I'm really grateful that I have that in me. I try to be, kind and courteous, and but I struggle with purpose. I don't even know if I have one. I mean, one nice thing about being involved in the program, and in fact, I was talking with someone about this just today, being sober and being involved in the program gave me another sort of like framework. And one thing it did to me that I don't have anymore, that I miss a bit, was no matter what kind of day I was having, no matter what kind of an asshole that I was, or what kind of an asshole someone else was to me, whatever, I could always tell myself, but I'm being a good boy today. Like, I stayed sober. I'm being a good boy. I'm doing that thing. And I know saying good boy, there is a pathology there, I'm sure, but like there was something in my brain where I could check this box and say, but I'm being a good person. I'm staying sober. I'm taking the calls of my sponsees. There was this framework around that. Like, you do that. You take the calls of your sponsees. You stay sober. You call your sponsor, whatever. So I had this checklist of things. I don't have that right now, and I'm struggling with what, in this new reality of not being sober, what that looks like. How do I continue to, or can I continue to tell myself, at least on a daily basis, I'm at least doing something right? I've got it. It's a growing up thing that I'm just.
Can I ask you what the catalyst was for your decision to depart?
Of course you can.
From the program?
The answer is not super easy for me to come by. I think it's multi-layered, and again, I keep going back to this. This last couple years have just been sort of doozies as far as processing. One of the small things that happened, though, was when I got to a place where I realized I don't believe in God, is then I guess one of the next logical steps was like, well, then I wasn't struck sober by God. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, like I wasn't handpicked to get sober out of this group of 20 tweakers. It's like, so then I'm sort of like, well, then what happened? And it's like, oh, it was all here. I did all of it. I did it with the help of the program, and I did it with the help of a lot of people who gave me so much help. But there was something where I said, but I still did it. Like, it wasn't a miracle. It wasn't, I wasn't, to go back to the way I thought as a child, if I acted good, if I didn't sin, I'd be taken care of. And so if I stayed sober, if I took the calls from my sponsees, if I did all the right stuff, I'd be taken care of, by this whatever is keeping its eye on me, that's keeping tally always. And
interesting.
I think one of the pillars that fell for me was I realized, I have the ability to start or stop. And I don't know, but then it's going to get a little tangential. But then my brain is like, this is AA talk. It's like, that's your disease talking to you. My head is like, you've convinced yourself that you're powerful and that you have the power to start and stop. And it's been a very confusing couple of months, man. My head is, so I know I tend to ramble on
no,
your
it's not, but I am getting the sense that there could be a feeling of being rudderless.
Very much so.
Not moored. Are those
absolutely
relevant?
No, I'm yes, and I'm struggling with that right now. And sort of like I alluded to earlier, in a way, I'm taking a comfort in that. Like, there's a part of me where I'm in this place now, and I'm just, when my head starts to spin and I start to second guess the choices that I've made, I have to step back and go like, okay, but like, where are you at, like right now? Like, what's going on right now? Not what's going to happen 10 years from now because you chose to smoke a joint. Where are you right now? Are things okay right now? And then it's like, yeah, things are okay right now. Other than I'm worried about 10 years from now. And it's like, okay, then relax. Maybe you're just okay. And I don't know, choosing to not be sober anymore. It's like there's this thought, like, do you know what a Rube Goldberg machine is?
I don't.
So a Rube Goldberg machine is like that video by that group OK Go, or like that game Mousetrap, where you build this thing, or like the beginning of Pee-wee's Big Adventure when he makes breakfast and he like drops the egg and the egg rolls down the thing and drops, and then a hammer comes and hits the thing. So my head is like, you've started this Rube Goldberg machine by picking up. Where's it going to end? You know, and it's like I have to get really, really clear with what's happening right now. You know?
Yes.
And it's like, otherwise fear just absolutely descends. But yeah, I think I'm a bit rudderless. I think I'm sort of trying to figure out, it's like, what does this look like now? I'm not checking that box every day that I can tell myself I'm a good boy.
Well, I mean, I think that you talked about purpose, and we talk about, I think when I look back again at a Vedic philosophy, would say that the experience of life is the meaning of life. It is the purpose. The purpose and the goal is the experience of it in and of itself, right? And since there's a sense of an internal deification, right? That
Totally.
God and my individual self are exactly the same, then there really is no right or wrong answer. It's the experience of it is the beauty and the goal.
Yeah.
You know?
It's pretty interesting. You know, when I can strip back all of the fear, and not just around the using stuff, but of course, for me, that's just like currently what's taking up a lot of my mental capacity. You know, it's like when I can step back and really just sort of take a look at where I am, like, I'm like, holy shit, like I've got a really good life. Like I've got an incredible life. Why am I spending it worrying? Like why am I spending my life worrying about who I am or what I've done? You know, the stuff around Christianity. Every once in a while, this little voice, you know, in the back of my head, it's the same one. It's always there, and it's always trying to fuck everything up, you know. And it's like, you know, I've gotten to this place where I don't really believe that people go to hell. You know, but there's always this little voice. It's like, but what if? Like, what if that's all true?
Yeah, for sure.
Are you whistling in the dark and you're just fooling yourself? And then you're going to spend eternity begging for a drop of water on your tongue from your mother who died when you were 6. Like, what the fuck, man? You know, it's just like...
It was about 1 year ago, just 1 year ago, and I hardly ever think this way, but 1 year ago I was looking at some YouTube video that was people talking about their experience like after death, people that had come back from that near-death experience thing, and they're all describing this upward trajectory and the light and everything, and that's what this YouTube video is showing. And then it said, but not everyone experiences that. And then the first person said, I was like heading down into this dark plane. And I'm telling you, as soon as I saw that, with all of the work that I've done, with where I am in my life, with how generally satisfied that I am with my spiritual development, there was an instant like upheaval of panic that came, that had been set from when I was a kid. It came welling up. It shocked me. I was like, oh, there's that old fear.
Yep.
What if you're wrong? My dad used to say, he'd say that. He's like, Steed, I hope that you're right. That's what he said to me. He's like, I really do.
Right.
And I'm just really terribly afraid if you aren't. Right.
Right. Yeah, of course. You know, it's like, it does such a number on our families, you know, and
but there's great hope.
Yeah, is there? Yeah, no, there is.
Yes, there. Well, I think that there is.
You know, what's funny is I find the greatest amount of hope through, of course, through sharing an experience with someone who's had a similar background. But I really find the greatest amount of hope through people. To sum it up in a very high level, who don't like give a fuck. Meaning, you know, my husband didn't take all of that on, and so I watched the way he moves through life. Yes, he has his problems for sure, but this stuff doesn't plague him on a daily basis. Right. He can have sex without being guilty and ashamed, you know, and I can too, but it's been a battle to get here, and sometimes that old stuff creeps back up, and that guilt and shame. I'll masturbate and then feel guilty afterwards. And it's like, wait a minute, like, no, I'm not going back to that. I've done enough work where like, I don't have to feel guilty and ashamed. You know, my guilt and shame is so acute that I cannot, even when, you know, back before I got sober, I would go out to a nightclub, and maybe drink, maybe not, whatever, but like have a great night. I would go out and hear like a fantastic DJ and just dance and have the best time. And I would leave the club and guilt and shame would just start to descend on me. And it was like, all I did was go out and have a good time. I didn't do anything that I could look at and be like, you were a bad guy. Like, I didn't go out and have anonymous sex. All of the big ones, I didn't do any of that. I was just dancing to music, which reminds me, I remember as a kid, we were only allowed to listen to Christian music. And there was a Christian radio station in town called K-Light. And they had this thing where they were like, we're going to give you a clue about a music act. And, and we'll give one clue. If someone calls in, they get 4 cassette tapes and whatever, and like I got it on the first clue, and I went and I got these cassettes from the Christian, radio station. They let me pick out, and I got like 3 Stryper cassettes, and I don't know if you know who Stryper is, but they were a Christian hair metal band,
right?
I mean, just and they wore tight leather, and their hair was. And I remember my dad saw that, and he was like, "You can't listen to that." And I was like, "But it's Christian music," and he was like,
not the right kind.
The beat, the music comes from Africa. Yeah. And it's like it's so funny now to think that my dad, Africa's where hair metal started.
Sure.
I mean, whatever. But he was so just, and my point of all that is I can't enjoy myself without guilt and shame coming into the picture. And it's this period of my life right now is really working hard to reject that, and that. Strangely includes, giving up my sobriety, but it's like, wait a minute, am I enjoying myself? Am I destroying my life? Am I destroying someone else's life? Then it's okay. It's just okay, But
well, we're coming up into the last few minutes here.
I remember talking to Jade a few weeks ago, December 22nd or something, 21st, and I had made this observation, and I said, what just occurred to me was that that I had to tell her and myself that the life that we prepare for having, what does it mean for us to abandon that in order to see the life that is waiting for us? What do you ever think about? I made a conscious effort and with all my will and my strength to transition out of that and depart from that and really be excited about the life that's waiting for me, meaning what is going to blanket you with joy and with love. Does that ever happen to you? I mean, do you think about that?
Now more than ever. Now more than ever. And again, I think it relates to this, making this change around my sobriety and doing this work in therapy around my stuff with my dad. I think my husband over the years a few times has asked me, it's like, or he has said, I just wish you could allow yourself to be happy. He just said, you do not allow yourself to be happy. And he goes, as soon as you start to get happy, you destroy it immediately, And so I'm hoping that through some of these big changes and some of this work, the hope is that I'm going to get to a place where I can just be a little bit more often rather than be spun, rather than living in this place of worry and fear and self-doubt, to just get to a place where it's like, I'm just going to be okay right now, whatever that looks like. And almost to your point, that may look like I go on and do something really interesting or fun or big, or it may just look like, I go to work every day and punch in on time, go home and listen to some music or whatever. It's like
I'll tell you what I hear and see. I mean, I don't talk. I mean, I haven't really spoken to you at length.
Sure.
We haven't had the opportunity. Well, I'll tell you what I see because I'm such a big fan of this book by Eckhart Tolle, and the title is "The Power of Now." If, let's say, we were, I was in program and I happened to have worked with you, and you are in your state of mind that you have now, what I do see and what is bright is that the questions that you pose to yourself has everything to do with what's happening now. Am I okay now? What's going to happen now? What's in my capability to do now? And even when the numerous times, because I go to revivals to thrifts, to thrift for like vintage T-shirts and whatever and knitwear. I see you carrying furniture and then just moving from one spot to the other. That labor is so involved with the now.
Right.
There's no behind a desk having to like fill out a calendar and set up meetings and stuff in the future. It's all about now. So that is really, really refreshing, to sense and know about
very
you.
Much so. I think I went through a bit of a crisis with my professional life a couple of years ago, and actually quit work. It took about 7 months off because I was just so depressed.
I'm there with you.
Okay, yeah. And so then I took this odd sort of little job at Revivals where I'm a warehouse guy moving furniture all day, and I love it.
Yes.
The money is not good.
Yes.
The money is not good.
No.
The benefits are good.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm always moving, and it's like my husband has been like, it's so nice to have you coming home from work.
Lovely.
Not angry.
Lovely. Yeah.
And I'm like,
because that's it. We are just kind of being in the moment and the joy of being now. I mean, one of my famous line is the spirituality of the day to day. What I can do, how I can express a talent or a skill or an art is through making food, inviting people around a table and creating big meals. So when I'm in the moment of shredding chicken or slicing vegetables, I relish it so much because I can actually see, on a muscular level or cellular level, my hands creating these slices of vegetables that eventually will be this meal that I can offer to my friends and family. And what beautiful, experience that could be.
It's a spiritual experience.
Yeah. So in the spirituality of like the day to day is so much a part of my brand.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Right?
It's interesting stuff to think about, and it's very, very heavy.
Yeah.
It's not heavy on my mind, but
Right.
it's a lot about what I'm attempting to do with this new chapter of my life. However this plays out, the intent is, yes, to just sort of be in the moment and question the fear and doubt and worry that I sort of drum up on anything. I can find a way to be worried or guilty about anything, and so it's like challenging that.
Well, it's my hope that we, all three of us, because, just Friday night, Steed and I were having this deep conversation. It's my hope as we say bye today is that we are able to kind of, really take on this momentous task of like finding joy in the next chapter in just being in the moment and receiving life as it comes.
Yep.
You give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for being
Thank you
with us
guys.
today.
So thoughtful.
It's really, really nice to talk to you.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, guys.
What a nice afternoon.
Thanks.
I'm going to go take a nap.